No, we have. By the way, we are live, and we beat Rush Limbaugh. We're in the #1 show right now, live.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah, so Jack.
Well, Jack Valenti. It's interesting about Jack Valenti is that. I'm sorry.
No, I'm telling our chat if they've got questions for Kenn, send them in.
Yeah, send them. Jack Valenti and Gerald Ford and Bill Moyers joined forces once when one of the cable channels did a series called The Men Who Killed Kennedy, and every one of them was looking at a different theory, and they did one program where they were looking at the theory of God, I'm going to freak out on names here. Was it Bar McClellan? Yeah, it was a Johnson did a theory actually. The book was called Blood and Oil, and
yes,
the guy who wrote it, I think his name was Bar McClellan, and and they put all this pressure of all the shows they did. They put all this pressure to never show that, to never sell it on DVD or anything like that, and they were successful. Those three guys did a letter writing campaign, called people, and stopped that one. Not so much because it implicated Johnson, although Moyers would have that as
absolutely. His hands would be as bloody could be if he were involved.
But the reason for it was that at the time, the author, and I think it was Bar McClellan, I wish I could remember his son's name, because his son was the press secretary of George Bush. So somebody had written a Kennedy assassination book and that not only was it a Johnson did a theory, but it also discussed the whole Australian angle and assassinations that happened right after that.
I'm dying to bring this.
But they didn't want to embarrass Bush, is what it was. They didn't want to embarrass Bush.
That gives me an opening I want to bring this up to the present. I want to talk about, just in passing, the towers coming down, 911, and where we are today. Do you think something like this just faded away?
Sure. It's all over now. Everything is above board. There are no more conspiracies. Don't worry about it. Let me tell you a story, though, about the 9/11 business.
Sure.
Many people know this, that there was an episode of The Lone Gunman. You know that show?
Yes. And yes.
I always maintained, actually, that The Lone Gunman were patterned after three of us guys that were doing zines at the time. Me, Jim Martin, who did Flatland, and Greg Bishop, who did The Excluded Middle. The only support I have for it is that, I'm sorry?
You picked that up from Kreisman and the Invaders.
That's exactly right. Kreisman's my idol, so I'm proud of my life after him. But no, in March before September 11th, the first episode of The Lone Gunman came out, and its plot line involved something called the Octium chip, which acted exactly like the Promise software, Octium, Octopus.
Right.
And it is put in this plane. And it's famous from some conspiracy people because this plane is headed toward the trade towers.
Wow.
And so people say, wow, here's proof that they had advanced knowledge that was going to happen. But the reason the plane doesn't hit the trade towers is because the Promise backdoor kicks in and turns it around at the last minute.
Well, who wrote the episode?
I don't know.
Was it Chris? Well, you know what? Guess what? There's an IMDb.
I'll Google it right now.
IMDb. It'll tell you.
Googling it.
There. I mean, I'll tell you this: the reason I have it on video is because I heard about this Octium business, and clearly this was some reference to the Octopus War. I didn't even know about the trade towers angle until many years later when I saw it on the internet.
Well, look, So
I have the episode. I can find it if they don't have it on IMDb.
Okay, so Kenn, let's flash forward to the Warren Commission. And here's Senator Richard Russ. Now, what's fascinating is what you have to ask yourself is this. And we had Peter Levenda on last week talking about this as well, especially the idea of a Fourth Reich, that the Nazi Reich never really ended. It just kind of split into various subdivisions, sub-offices, right, with members of the Reich, including Werner von Braun. He and other members of people, Kurt Debus, who came over in paperclip, were actually sending United States space secrets back to East Germany for the other, and the Soviet Union for the other scientists who were working for the Soviet Union, basically sharing Reich rocketry secrets, which is one reason why the Soviets got Sputnik up before we got our first satellite up.
That's right. That's right. Well, that's basically the idea that Castellaro was trying to get across is the transnational and multinational character of this kind of conspiracy. In fact, recently in the news, they've been talking about the sterilization program in California.
Yes.
They sterilized, and then apparently they were in communication with the Nazis, and they had a lot of friendly communication going. The Nazis really admired what they were doing, and they shared information in science and all that other kind of stuff. It knows no national boundary. And I think that's where Oswald found himself when finally Kennedy's assassinated. He's there in the library. He really didn't know who he's working for at that point. The Soviets, the CIA, something else altogether. And that's usually what happens. It dissolves into this mess of multiple allegiances.
Well, see, one of the things
another really good book on this was by Dick Russell. The man who knew too much. Dick Russell.
The man who knew too much. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
See, a couple of fascinating things are these: that during the war, first of all, questions. You throw out there, why would Lyndon Johnson appoint to the Warren Commission the very human being who probably hated Kennedy with a deep hatred because Kennedy fired him after the Bay of Pigs invasion, Allen Dulles. Allen Dulles, by the way, who was outed as somebody who had basically been co-opted by Soviet intelligence and East German intelligence by having the CIA relying on the Gehlen spy ring, the West German spy ring. Gehlen was an SS officer. He was co-opted, and yet the Gehlen spy ring itself had been co-opted by the East German, by the Stasi. So the question is, why is Dulles backdoor indirectly involved with the Stasi in kind of this joint intelligence ring, and did Gehlen know about it? And who blew the whistle? Arthur Trudeau, head of U.S. Army Intelligence, G2, who then Eisenhower threatens to fire until the United States Senate, i.e. Strom Thurmond, says, fire this guy, and we appoint no more generals. So Dulles is sent off to Turkey. This is 1956. Dulles is sent off to Turkey. Trudeau gets his third star, but is kicked out of Army Intelligence and posted to Army R&D Command in 1957, where he discovers Project Horizon, which is the moon base plan, and years later brings Corso on board, and there begins another story. Corso, of course, working for Richard Russell on investigating the Warren Commission on the extension phone when Lyndon Johnson tells Richard Russell that he, Lyndon Johnson, does not believe in the single bullet theory himself, but if they discount the single bullet theory and allow the grassy knoll shooter, it's no longer the lone gunman. It's a conspiracy. If it's a conspiracy, it's the Soviets. If it's the Soviets, 40 million people die in a nuclear war for the death of one person who's never coming back. That convinces Richard Russell, who then convinces Jerry Ford to change the entry wound on Kennedy from the autopsy, moving it up to his neck, therefore allowing the magic bullet to hit Kennedy's wrist and hit Connolly.
Yeah. Yes, all that is exactly right. Those are the kinds of things that, and really most people believe that. I mean, you take a poll today, 90% of the people of this country, despite the Warren Commission and all the years of cover up in the media, most people understand that it was done. It was a result of one conspiracy or another.
Well, now
I think that debate is over. The one guy who there are two major authors who don't believe this. One of them is Gerald Posner, who totally discredited, and he now works for Hamid Karzai's brother or something as a press agent. And the other one is Victor Bugliosi.
We all know him. Yep.
Yeah. Now,
but for the most part, anybody who actually goes and looks at the data, very few people come away thinking that Oswald.
And look, it is, and Ken, what we now know is this is an official conspiracy. The Church Committee in 1975 said it was a conspiracy.
Well, let's
right.
go.
Even the U.S. government doesn't believe the Warren Commission.
There you go.
Right. Okay. Now the lone gunman. I want to give you some information about who wrote that opening episode. And I find this odd. It's all 10, it had 10 writers.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but the point is, they're all the people you know. They're all the X-File writers and stuff. The point is, though, to have 10 writers on one episode strikes me as very, very odd. And it looks like...
Name the writers.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is nobody takes the blame, nobody takes the credit.
Okay,
it's basically, it's Chris Carter, Vince Gilligan, John Sheehan, Frank Spotnitz, Chris Carter, okay.
Is Howard on there?
Glenn Morgan and James Wong.
Okay.
No.
Howard's not there. Okay.
So I'm wrong. It's not 10. It's, well, the tune, it says in the liner notes that it was written by 8 people plus 2 more. The first one. I'm only interested in the first one right now. The
Lone Gunman episode, right?
Yeah, the pilot to steal the Octium 4 chip from Econ. Yeah, and that's the one I'm looking at. And that it says here under writers, Chris Carter, creator, Vince Gilligan, creator, and 8 more credits. And then I think it could be a typo, so it's not that many writers, but it's everybody. And
Well, I don't want to claim credit for anybody's idea. I do remember there was another program called Dark Skies.
Yes,
where they introduced actual historic characters. And at the time, I was doing an online column for Steam Shovel Press, in which I'd go out and I'd find something interesting, like for instance that Carl Sagan in 1962 did a lecture before a rocket association, arguing that there's probably an alien civilization on the far side of the moon.
Oh my God!
And so I presented this, and then I said, well, what became of Carl? Because Carl Sagan was one of the great, poo-pooers of the very concept. I said, did MJ-12 get him? And like the very next week, did the MJ-12 get to him? And the very next week, this is a plot element in Dark Skies. And then I would do another column discussing the Dorothy Kilgallen thing and the fact that she interviewed Ruby and that she died mysteriously after being very clearly sober and intelligent on What's My Line one night, and she winds up dead, and the Ruby transcript goes missing. Boom, Dorothy Kilgallen's a figure in that show too, and I see it all the time. And Mel Gibson did a movie called Conspiracy Theory, and all the stuff that his little character spouts. It's all out of Steam Shovel Press. So, but nobody owns history, and really my role has been as a conduit of this obscure information. I wish I was making what Mel Gibson makes off of it, of course, but, I'm glad to be able to amplify it that way.
The person who was behind Dark Skies, there were 2 people behind Dark Skies that I know. One was Bryce Zabel, who's the co-author with Rich Dolan on the book After Disclosure. Right, Bryce Zabel was in charge of Dark Skies, and the other person was the person at Sony who was the exec for Dark Skies, and that was Jeff Sagansky, who has his own private equity firm investing in entertainment properties.
But who did we know that gave us the tape?
Oh, that was another person entirely, and I don't know who that person was.
Is it Peter Lance?
It wasn't Peter Lance.
Okay, but here, Ken, you'd like to know about this. Before Dark Skies aired, we were friendly with some people involved in the production, and I can't remember who it is, and someone gave us a raw tape of the finished first episode as they had hoped it was going to be, and then eventually it got on the air. It was totally different, but this is as the Dark Skies creators wanted it to be, and we have that on a VCR tape. Right?
Oh, I would love to see that.
Yeah.
I would love to see that,
Yeah. Remind me in email. I will get it.
Yeah.
I'll either get a copy.
We can dupe it off with our machine.
Can you watch a VCR at your place?
I would love to see that. As I recall, it was a really ambitious show. It expected to go through the Watergate years and all that, but then they had to speed it up, and it was canceled at the last minute.
Well, so let's get back. So let's get back to, I want to get back to 1963 and this whole thing of, you wonder a couple of things. First of all, did Boeing, let's just say Boeing was one of the conspirators or the main conspirator. Did Boeing have the wherewithal to pull this thing off? Because it would have had to have gone through Secret Service. Obviously, Lyndon Johnson, the vice president, obviously...
It's the military-industrial complex.
A lot of, yes, but would they have had wherewithal? Question.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, would Boeing have had the wherewithal on its own to pull this off?
Well, it's kind of hard to, I don't think Garrison considered Boeing the central player either. You know, I think his concept was that there is no central player. It's a convergence of powerful interests. You know, and they hired Chrisman through this Boeing connection.